An exciting program and a stellar lineup of climate experts to talk about the Montana Climate Plan, what we can learn from the plan, and tools for local action that we can start taking here in Park County to help us reach our state and national climate goals. We have about an hour and a half for today's presentation, and I'll be your host tonight. I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for questions at the end. So please mute your phone. And if you have questions that arise as we're going through, feel free to put them in the chat, and then we'll do our best to get to all of the questions at the end of our presentation. My name is Michelle Ibarraga. I serve as the Executive Director for the Park County Environmental Council here in Park County. We are your community conservation group. We work with the people here in Park County to safeguard the land, water, wildlife, and communities in Yellowstone's Northern Gateway. We do that through grassroots organizing and advocacy. I'm also representing Moms Clean Air Force tonight, a community of more than 1 million moms, dads, aunties, tias, abuelitas, opas, and more across the country fighting for our children's health and climate action. As you all know, we are incredibly blessed to live in an incredible place with striking mountain ranges and valleys that are home to native grasses, rich soils teeming with life, wild rivers, grizzly bears, field mice, wolverines, hummingbirds, migrating herds of elk, mule deer, and pronghorn, and of course, bison that once freely roamed these lands. Park County is also the traditional homeland of the Absaloka, or the Crow tribe, and their ancestors. For the Crow and other indigenous people across the region, like the northern Yellowstone's Tukadeka, this area continues to be culturally and spiritually significant. Europeans who arrived here in the 19th century were also drawn to the beauty and bounty that this land offers. So what is Park County today has a long tradition of human habitation for people that have loved, cherished, and stewarded this place. And we are committed to working together to honor that legacy and this place for future generations. Our conversation tonight is about climate change. And I'll just quickly share that I learned about the devastating, potentially devastating, and disproportionate impacts of climate change on communities around the world as a young adult. I realized that my passion for caring for people and the environment were inextricably tied to climate justice. That the calling that I've always felt to do more for people to prevent needless suffering could start right here at our home by being better stewards of our wild places. And as a parent, this work feels even more important, if not desperate, that we work together to create a livable future for the little ones that I love so much and so many others. So I am going to do a quick preview of our speakers and then pass it over. Our first speaker tonight is Dr. Kathy Whitlock. She'll be followed by Dr. Bruce Maxwell, Mark Haggerty from Headwaters Economics, Dr. Paul LaChapelle from Climate Smart Montana, and then Sarah Stans and myself are tasked with closing us out with some local action. So our first speaker is Dr. Kathy Whitlock. Dr. Whitlock is a Regents Professor Emerita in Earth Sciences at Montana State University and a Fellow of the Montana Institute on Ecosystems. Kathy is a nationally and internationally recognized for her research and leadership activities in the field of climate and environmental change, including her work in Yellowstone. She served as the lead author of the 2017 Montana Climate Assessment and was on the council that developed the recent Montana Climate Solutions Plan. Kathy is also currently working with a team on developing a climate assessment for the greater Yellowstone area. It's very exciting for those of us here in Park County, and that'll be released later this year. I've known Kathy for years. I think she is not only a brilliant scientist, but a wonderful human being. Thank you so much, Kathy, for joining us today. I'll pass it over to you.
Well, thanks, Michelle. I'm so glad to be part of this conversation this evening and to talk a little bit about some of the findings from the Montana Climate Solutions Plan. let me see, this will stop. Do you want to continue? Yes. There you go. Can you see my slides? Okay, I hope that's a yes. Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit before we started talking about the solutions plan about the Montana climate assessments, which I think was really foundational for the development of this statewide plan. The Montana climate assessment came out in 2017 as this collaboration between the two universities and state and federal agencies and tribes and NGOs, and it covered forests, water, and agriculture, what climate change meant for those sectors. But since then, we've released another document that came out in December, and that's looking at climate change and its impact on human health. And now, as Michelle said, I'm working with a group on the Greater Yellowstone climate assessment, and that's really a labor of love for me because I've spent so much of my career working in this region. So I want to lay out the climate landscape a little bit and tell you what we're finding from these reports. Let's see. How do I advance? Let me try again. There we go. The first thing that's clear is that Montana is getting warmer. We're already seeing climate change. The Montana Climate Assessment, for example, looked at weather records from 1950 to 2015, and we're already seeing a 2 to 3 degree Fahrenheit warming, especially in the winters and the springs. And one of the ways we know it's getting warmer is that the growing season is longer. It's about 12 days longer, which really isn't a bad thing. And since 1950, there's been sort of variable changes in precipitation, but there's been no strong trends like there are in temperature. Now, the Montana Climate Assessment presents two scenarios of warming. These are called RCPs. And RCP 4.5 on the left is the sort of intermediate scenario for warming. This is the amount of warming that happens if we can curb greenhouse gas emissions by the middle of the century or into the second half of the century. So this is RCP 4.5 is well within our grasp to accomplish. RCP 8.5 is the worst case scenario of warming. Basically, if we do nothing to stop greenhouse gases and we continue on the present trajectory. So I'm going to show you these two scenarios, and just remember that 4.5, I think, is something we can get there, or maybe even better. 8.5 would be a worst case situation. The Montana Climate Assessment shows warming across the state, and this is a really robust finding in the models. All models show that Montana gets warmer. It's somewhere between a 4.5 to 6 degree warming by the middle of the century. When you look at the monthly warming that's occurring in those projections, you can see that I guess we're in south central Montana, so we're kind of the middle row of this graph. And here's the months of the year, again, looking at mid-century. And what you can see is that in 4.5 and in the worst case scenario, we get warming and every month gets warmer. Precipitation has a more seasonal component to it, and this is what's really interesting, I think, for us. It gets wetter in winter, spring, and fall, but there's less precipitation projected for summer. So the seasonality of precipitation changes going into the future with wetter winter times and drier summer times. Okay, so here's the Greater Yellowstone Climate Assessment, and I'm giving you a bit of a sneak preview for some of what we're finding for the Greater Yellowstone area. This assessment's very cool because we're looking at the different watersheds of Greater Yellowstone, what we call the Huck 6 watersheds. And so you can see Livingston is the main community in this upper Yellowstone watershed. And you can also see by the grid work, this is the resolution of the climate projections that we're providing in this new assessment. So it's much higher resolution. So the temperature trends in Greater Yellowstone aren't so different than Montana. You can see there's been a sort of steady warming in the historical data. And then depending on which pathway of warming we go on, we're gonna have a lot of warming, maybe 10 degrees or more. Or if we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, we can flatten that curve and get to something like 4 to 6 degrees warming by the end of the century. The consequence of that warming for us really comes in how much snow versus rain we get. And so here's a graph for the Greater Yellowstone region showing 1950 on the left and 2100 end of the century on the right. And blue is the elevation of snow, green is the elevation of rain, and yellow, orange, and red is the elevation of slush, that kind of in-between weather that we all hate. And what you can see is that in 1950, snow line was about 6,000 feet. On this 4.5 scenario, it will be at about 10,000 feet. And the elevation of slush, where it's very unpredictable, sort of widens as you go out into the future. When you look at these maps, this is where snow line has been, 1986 to 2005 in blue. And you can see that in the coming 20 years, it's shrinking, then in the next 20 years, shrinking more, so that by the time you get to the end of the century, only the highest peaks, even if we can reduce greenhouse gases, have snow. So that's a really alarming projection that we have to pay attention to. One consequence of that is that we go into the summers being drier because the snow doesn't last as long, it comes as rain, it melts sooner, and you're getting less precipitation in summer anyway. This is a drought index from 1950 to the end of the century. And when the graphs are in the blue, it's a wetter year, and when they're in the yellow, it's a drier year. And what you can see going into the future is that we have a lot more drought. There's been quite a few wet periods in the last 70 years, but we go into droughts. Notice that the droughts last longer. They last several years, and they're also more extreme. So this has implications for stream flow, for stream temperature, for end of summer water availability. And it also means that we're going to be facing more wildfires. So the kinds of fires that we've seen, starting with Yellowstone in 1988, and then happening almost every year somewhere in the West since then, are going to continue. The Montana Climate Solutions Plan was put together by a group of about 40 leaders from across Montana, and they represented a variety of sectors. There were people from the utility and energy sector, from the business community and labor groups. There were NGOs and community planners. State agencies were very well represented. The tribes were present as well, and so were the universities. This plan is available through the Montana Department of Environmental Quality. You can download it. You don't have to remember that link. You can just type it in. I think you can also get it on our Institute on Ecosystem webpage as well. The plan is divided into sort of 3 parts, and we're going to talk about these 3 parts tonight. The first part has to deal with climate adaptation, getting the best in climate information to the people that need it, and helping with decision support. So the first part of the plan that Bruce is going to talk about is ideas for preparing Montanans and Montana communities for climate impacts, and then also updating assessments so that we have the best science available for making projections. The second part of the plan has to do with greenhouse gas mitigation strategies for Montana. And this is quite a lengthy part of the plan. And the goals of this section are to how can we achieve greenhouse gas neutrality? That means that the amount of carbon that we emit is equal or less than what we store. How do we do that first in the electrical sector by 2035? And then how do we achieve carbon neutrality economy-wide by around 2050? And the last part of the plan that Mark led was what are the opportunities for innovation for Montana in finding climate solutions and also in helping communities transition to a new economy. So this part talks about specific areas where we're advancing research and development can help us, where there's commercialization of new technologies underway. And then also, how do we address the needs of communities and workers that are going from sort of fossil fuel-based economies to this new green energy economy? So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to pass it to the next person. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. So now I'm going to introduce Bruce, Dr. Bruce Maxwell. Thank you so much, Kathy. Dr. Maxwell is our next speaker tonight. Dr. Maxwell is a professor of agroecology at Montana State University. He co-authored the agricultural chapter of the 2017 Montana Climate Assessment and climate-related health impacts chapter of the Climate Change and Human Health Report. In 2019, Dr. Maxwell was appointed by the governor to the Montana Climate Solutions Council, and his research is focused on improving the resilience of agriculture in Montana. Go ahead and take it away, Dr. Maxwell.
Thank you. I'm just bringing up my screen here. All right. Are you seeing my presentation? Should say preparing Montanans for climate impacts.
We can see it.
Do the full slide view, Bruce.
Oh, okay.
Do a presentation view.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, good.
Perfect.
Well, Kathy, nice introduction, and thank you all for inviting me to talk to you. I'm excited to hear that Livingston is starting a process of organizing around this issue and thinking about a community plan. So hopefully we can help you get started down that road. As Kathy pointed out, here's with the website again, the connection, but I'm going to talk pretty specifically about the adaptation component of this Montana Climate Solutions Plan and what exactly is in it. So in our component, which was titled Preparing Montanans for Climate Impacts, the set of recommendations that we came up with, and I won't be able to go into all the details here, but you can certainly get those in the report. But the first one was to establish the Montana Climate Solutions Network that would share climate information and resources, build capacity in communities like yourself, connect climate solutions at state, local, regional, and tribal nation scale. So this is a real opportunity. There's several communities have already been organized, but this is where the idea is to create this network that will bring all the entities together, state agencies, federal agencies, universities, and of course, tribes, as well as the communities that are really setting out to develop these plans. We want to build community resilience to climate change by coordinating with existing planning efforts. So there's plans for all sorts of different things, and certainly things associated either directly or indirectly with climate change, but things like floods and disaster planning and those kinds of things. So that's important. We want to adapt Montana's built environment to climate change. So there's a whole lot of specifics involved with that, of course, but basically that's preparing ourselves for a hotter climate and changing our infrastructure as needed to do that. We want to protect outdoor recreation and tourism resources to maintain a diverse and healthy economy. So this certainly has to do with positive mental and physical health outcomes, but also developing resilient, high quality of life of the residents of Montana, as well as visitors. And this is called for, of course, in our state constitution. So it's a logical thing for us to focus on, and obviously an important sector of the economy for a place like Livingston. We want to build the resilience of Montana working lands. So the idea here is to really work with folks that depend on the land to come up with the best modification, perhaps, of their decisions to prepare most effectively for climate change and the kinds of things that it's going to bring. Those points that Kathy was making, the changes in the patterns of when we receive precipitation, the changes in patterns of much hotter summers, and with that comes drought. Those kinds of things will be very important to agriculture, but not just agriculture. Clearly the recreation and tourism industry is going to be influenced by those things in a big way. We want to enhance wildfire resilience across ownership boundaries in response to accelerating climate impacts. That is clearly a point of importance. You were the recipient of the Bridger smoke this year, and so you got a good preview, perhaps, of what's more to come on that. We want to safeguard Montana's water quality and quantity for climate change. There's a lot of effort around water planning and for quality and quantity in Montana, and so we need to coincide with that and develop that those areas of interest. So first of all, I wanted to spend most time perhaps on this network and what it will focus on, because I think it's most important for organizing community efforts. And Paul will go into even more detail on this in supporting community planning initiatives, and Climate Smart Montana, I think, is the logical place to help with that organization. And I know there's others that are sort of organizing themselves and joining different communities that are in the same stages of developing these climate plans. So there's some great activity across Montana in a number of places where you have, of course, Missoula and Bozeman that have pretty advanced climate plans. Helena is working on one. There's a group in the Bitterroot that is working on one. There's one in Whitefish that's been ongoing, and another one starting in the Flathead as well. I know there's one on the Beartooth Front. All have similar issues, I would say, to Livingston, and they'd be good folks to coordinate with. So that's something that I'm sure Paul will get into a bit. It will oversee and coordinate staff and fund a Resilience AmeriCorps program. If you're familiar with the AmeriCorps program, the idea is to bring young people to really help with these efforts, to be the legs on the ground, to help do organization, gather data, gather information, and really be a resource. That's what we would like to see. That was a recommendation. It will have to be, of course, find some funding to do that, but I think we're optimistic about those things, particularly at the federal level now. Support production of regular climate assessment reports. The Institute on Ecosystems has been responsible for the reports that Kathy talked about. Certainly, we've only covered a portion of the different sectors that we could have covered. We haven't done one on tourism and recreation, for example, that's begging to be done. We haven't done one on wildlife, and we really haven't done a thorough one on economics in Montana. So those are all ones that we should do and could do, and hopefully IOE will receive some funding to continue those efforts. Support the Montana Climate Office and their products. The Climate Office, which is housed at the University of Montana, has really worked hard to strengthen our ability to predict climate and to assess climate across the state, and to start to offer up tools that are useful to people on the ground making management decisions, like agriculturists, foresters, et cetera. So they're a very important entity and will play a strong role into the future. Building the Montana Mesonet of a set of weather stations that gives us a much more complete view of what the climate is looking like in Montana, what it might be doing. And then to advance resilience strategies identified in the Montana Climate Solutions Plan. These strategies are ones that I'll go on to talk about a little bit here and introduce. So some of the key strategies for successful adaptation are such that structure representation and governance of this Montana Climate Solutions Network. So that's the first thing, is to how to structure it. So I won't go into the details of that. That's not that important, but or for you to know. But it is, we have, the point is, I guess, to see the degree of organization that we've put to this. We got to pretty detailed approach to how this might work. Climate Smart Montana, the roadmap and toolkit for planning, building on Montana, but building on the other activities like Montana Ready Communities Initiative, the Montana Resilience Framework, tribal climate adaptation plans that have already been produced for some of the tribes, and disaster mitigation plans, wildfire plans, drought and flood plans. All these can guide communities toward adaptation plans. Or what you can really do is start to incorporate climate specific activities into those planning efforts that are already there. The next strategy is to work with communities, local governments to identify their highest priority risks and vulnerabilities and implement hazard mitigation plans that incorporate climate impacts. So in other words, you're already looking at some of these hazard things, flood potential, drought potential, those kinds of things, but really looking at some of the specifics. I just give one example there. The increased urban forest cover is a good example of something that a community can very specifically point to and improve upon to mitigate the issues of heat. Develop and strengthen networks of outdoor recreation and tourism professionals across agencies, jurisdictions, and private sectors to improve collaborative approaches to identifying risks and vulnerabilities and to facilitate adaptation planning. This is really crucial. I think Livingston is a perfect place to where this is with all the fishing guides and other sort of recreational aspects associated with Yellowstone and the river. This is a very important group to engage in planning and for the kinds of things that we've already seen some of, but are likely to see more of. And then I combined 1E and 1G, work with locally important economic sectors. Certainly Livingston, the forest products, again, tourism and recreation, and specifically including them in these adaptation plans. They have to be part of the discussion, clearly. Agriculture is another clearly important part of what's going on in Park County. So those folks have to be part of these plans and thinking through how are they going to deal with what these projected climates are. And you know, even if for some reason things really change, of course, here we are talking about climate change on one of the coldest days of the year. This never fails. But anyway, we really need to think about the facts that the trends are there, that they're coming. And so we really need to be focused on exactly how do we mitigate some of those impacts. But that really takes a lot of input from those folks. And plan for the wildfire situation. Wildfires and smoke are going to be a fact of life. And there's every indication that with heating, the fuel situation just gets worse. We should be preparing for that in a more effective way. And then of course, water. Water is always essential in Montana. Water quality and quantity. Those agriculturists that depend on irrigation, talking with many of them, the immediate answer certainly to the crop growers and those producing hay is, well, I'm just going to have to irrigate more. Well, you might not be able to irrigate more because we might not have as much water in the rivers at the time when you really need the irrigation, that late summers, when we've already had our high water, we've already run all the water down through the system, and we're really at a low water situation much earlier in the year. So that's part of the factors that we need to start to plan around those cases. With that, that's it for me. Paul, you want to step in here? Let me stop my share.
Well, thanks, Bruce. I'm actually gonna pass it over to up next is Mark Haggerty. Let me get with Headwaters Economics. So thank you so much, Bruce, and welcome, Mark. Mark leads Headwaters Economics team on research in tax policy, rural economic development, and community planning around energy and economic transitions. Mark has worked across the state and the West as a researcher, teacher, community organizer, and facilitator. At Headwater Economics for the past 10 years, he's worked to understand why some communities do better than others and to communicate key lessons and policy ideas to people, the people working to make their own states, counties, and towns more livable and sustainable. Mark's also served on lots of local planning boards, worked with county commissioners and state legislators across the West. Thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you very much. One of my very first jobs in Montana was working with Dennis Glick and Ken Weaver at the local government center at MSU. And we did a bunch of work in Park County on the Yellowstone River, trying to get setbacks established and dealing with riprap and all kinds of other issues that have been longstanding, I know there. So it's always nice to be able to spend time back working in Montana and talking with local folks. So I appreciate that. So I'm not gonna try to go through all of these recommendations because they're complicated. And what I wanna do is maybe try to tell a little bit of a story instead. And the way that our committee approached our work was to recognize that Montana's economy is already changing and that climate is likely to accelerate some of the changes that we're seeing. So we all know that a lot of the transition in fossil fuels is happening to Montana, that we are largely an exporting state. We mine coal and we deliver it to power plants across the Midwest where it's burned to generate electricity. And to the extent that we develop oil and gas, that is also exported out of the state. And a lot of decisions being made by other states, by markets and by utilities to transition away from coal have significant impacts on Montana. Bighorn County, Montana, I was talking with a commissioner there today. They've had 2 coal mine closures just in the last month, and they're in bankruptcy negotiations with one of the companies, and it looks like the county is not going to have the money that they need to pay for staff and services. I mean, they are really hurting right now, and that is something that is happening not because of anything that Montana is doing, but because of things that are happening outside of our state. We've also seen just an incredible concentration of employment and income in the cities. So 75% of all the jobs that were created in Montana between the global financial crisis in 2008 and the onset of the global pandemic in 2020 were concentrated in just 5 cities in Montana. So we're seeing these really dramatic structural changes in the economy. And when we started thinking about our climate strategies and what we were going to do to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions and how we were going to help Montana adapt, I think the really unique thing about this council and this plan is that we took really seriously the idea that we should try to use this opportunity to strengthen Montana's economy and also to ensure that no communities were left behind, that we focused on a just transition. And so a lot of the strategies that Kathy and Bruce have already talked about, in particular the kind of integrated planning across the state, is really important to that just transition piece. So I want to talk about some of the ways that we tried to use that integrated planning strategy to inform a just transition, the ideas that we used to try to strengthen Montana's economy, and how we thought about supporting workers and communities across the state. And I think the key thing about the planning strategy, to me at least, is that there are a lot of existing plans that are happening across the state. And the goal is to provide the resources and the capacity for communities to develop solutions and priorities locally, but that those local priorities have to be supported with information, with technical expertise, and with funding. And so the idea behind this Climate Solutions Network is to coordinate and deliver those resources to the communities so that they can actually start planning for their own futures. And I won't belabor that, but I think it's important to kind of recognize that the local advisors, the local actors in this really are setting the agenda, they're setting the priorities. They're supported by the Montana Youth Resilience Corps, who has staff capacity to actually go do some work, bring it back to the local advisors. So you're building the capacity of communities to actually do stuff between meetings, which is often a problem in these small communities that have limited capacity. And then linking together the university and the state agencies is where you can really deliver some significant resources to those communities. So I think that's just worth saying again, because it is so central to a whole bunch of different sections of the climate adaptation plan. The way we tried to tackle strengthening the state's economy was really through this idea of innovation clusters. And the whole kind of theory and practice of economic development is changing. And what we used to do is provide a whole bunch of incentives and regulatory relief and try to attract new businesses and go after smokestacks to try to build Montana's economy. And I say that's the old way, but of course we're still doing it now in Helena as we speak. It maybe used to be the old way, but we seem to be returning to our ways. But really the new way to think about it is that economic development works best when it is locally led. It's supporting existing businesses, existing entrepreneurs, but again, it's supported through this whole network of basic research through the university system, the capacity through state agencies and industry associations to try to partner and commercialize those technologies and systems, and supported with state leadership and funding and a commitment to allow communities to experiment and sometimes to fail, and to not be worried about taking risks that can lead to innovations that can offer business growth opportunities and jobs. And so we focused on this idea of creating regional clusters of innovation across the state. And we tried to think about how we could best leverage the existing resources and capacities of different regions of the state. So this idea of trying to link together the innovation and creativity and investment in the state cities to those rural places that are going to actually be central in implementing the climate mitigation and climate adaptation strategies. So we came up with 6 different innovation clusters. The first was a Northwest Montana mass timber and wood products manufacturing innovation cluster that focuses on the existing capacity in the timber industry, but on new innovative products like the Smart Lamb and manufactured wood products. We focused on renewable energy, in particular a proposal to do renewable hydrogen in Butte, which was a proposal to use excess renewable energy capacity from Eastern Montana when it's available to drive a very energy intensive process to create hydrogen in Butte that would be piped down to Salt Lake City, stored in underground salt caves, and then eventually piped back out and delivered to power plants, natural gas fired power plants in California to be burned for energy production. That was a proposal that came to the Climate Committee. We had some pretty interesting conversations among our committee members with the proponents. And since that time, the conversations have changed a little, and the recommendation is maybe not the way that we had hoped it would come out. There's a lot of talk about tax breaks and exemptions from certain regulations in Montana, which was not the intention of the Climate Solutions Council, just for the record. We talked about getting together some of the manufacturing and industrial capacity in Billings and trying to create some net zero opportunities there in that manufacturing and industrial cluster. a Northern Plains Precision Agricultural and Soil Carbon Initiative, a cluster to try to deliver some of the innovation coming out of the university system to landowners and practitioners to help them improve their management, to sequester more carbon and reduce emissions in the agricultural sector, and to innovate in new products. I am speaking here about Bruce Maxwell's expertise, so I will not belabor that point, lest I get it all wrong. A renewable energy innovation cluster in central Montana to develop pump storage, wind and solar technologies and installations. And finally, some innovation around biofuels in the southwest portion of the state, which leverage some existing projects that were going on there. So that idea of innovation clusters was a way to try to generate some leadership at the state level, to leverage the capacity of the research institutions and the community colleges to develop a specialized workforce and make investments into these sectors that are already important in Montana, to make sure that we could grow them and build on them and maintain our leadership position in a lot of these economies. The other two pieces that we talked quite a bit about were workforce transitions and fiscal policy. And they didn't all make it into recommendations, but I just want to give people a sense of the conversations in the direction that we would like to be able to go. It's pretty clear that economic transitions happen without a lot of warning and without the consent or knowledge of workers and communities. And we need, and there's often a lack of coherent policy to help them transition. And so one of the really important pieces in the just transition is making sure that labor is at the table and that we have solutions to support wages, to support unions, and to try to find meaningful opportunities to transition. We focused a lot on the role of apprenticeship in Montana to support workers. And we also focused a lot on really using the capacity in the community colleges around the state, and including the tribal colleges, to do workforce training and build some capacity there, which in these small communities is actually a really important economic driver. Just the employment and the investment in those community colleges around workforce training and development can actually be a really important economic development opportunity in these very small communities. And then finally, we really recognized that some of the solutions recommended in the plan would have a fiscal impact on the state and local communities. We have a tax structure that is heavily weighted towards taxing fossil fuels and other natural resources. And as those decline, we don't necessarily have a diversified tax structure to fall back on. We don't have a sales tax that can leverage revenue from a recreation-based economy back into communities, for example. When we were writing this plan, there were two interim committees working in the legislature that were addressing these topics. So we didn't make any direct recommendations, but we did have several conversations with those interim committees and just recognized the need to reform fiscal policies to make sure that the solutions outlined in the climate plan can be aligned with the need for community revenue and revenue to sustain state institutions as well. So that's just a really important piece to keep in mind. Plans hopefully get implemented. So I'm going to stop there, and I will look forward to questions later on.
Thank you so much, Mark. Next up, we have Dr. Paul LaChapelle. Paul is a professor in the Department of Political Science at Montana State University in Bozeman. He teaches and conducts research about community climate change, resiliency, diversity and inclusion, and social justice topics. Paul's publications include the edited book, Addressing Climate Change at the Community Level, as well as journal articles on energy impacts in communities, democratic practice, and local governance. Paul has been working on issues of energy and more specifically, climate change for the last 8 years. In late 2019, he started the Climate Smart Montana Group as a nonpartisan, nonprofit network with the goal of sharing information and resources to better coordinate community-based climate solutions and resiliency efforts here in Montana. So Paul, we're looking forward to hearing more. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Michelle. It's great to be with you. And I'm so impressed to see such a great group and large group of what I'm assuming are citizens and maybe not professionals involved in climate work and climate science and climate policy. And one of the things I think that we're seeing here, and I just posted in the chat this report from in USA News from November of 19, so a little bit dated. The fact that now Pew survey reported that over 50% of young Republicans, so those are under 38, age 38, are now supportive of the federal government doing more on climate change. It's incredible what's happening right now. I mean, this is not the same country in many ways as it was just a few months ago, but even within the last few years, we're just seeing such a sea change in attitudes and behavior approaching this topic. People recognizing that it's an issue, that, as many scientists say, that it's an existential threat, and that it is going to be the issue that's tied to so many other issues. The intersectionality kind of discipline that's coming up now, discussions tying to issues of wealth and equity, racial justice, environmental justice, et cetera. So it's a really exciting time with all kinds of diverse partnerships being, coming together and being formed. And that was kind of the intent with this group, Climate Smart Montana. So again, I am a professor at the university, and I'm going to start sharing my screen as well while we're talking. And give me just a second to do this here. Great. Can you see that? Is that up? Okay, great.
Yeah, you can.
Great.
That's
so
perfect.
we myself and some colleagues, when I was with Extension until just about a year ago, I'm now a faculty member in the Department of Political Science, but we wanted to do more in terms of involving citizens in engaging, in learning, in networking, and we created this this platform, this group called Climate Smart Montana. I worked with Steve Thompson from the National Center for Appropriate Technology and Amy Sillenberg from Climate Smart Missoula. And we came up with this idea to try to network with groups across the state as kind of an affinity group. And there's this, this idea that we often say in my field in community development, many of us refer to ourselves as the locally lonely. Because we're passionate about a topic, but we just don't have the ability to connect and network and share our ideas and our successes with colleagues. And so the intent to Climate Smart Montana was to create this platform, and you can see it's a nonpartisan, nonprofit network to share information and resources. And really our goal is to just involve anyone who wants to be a part of this group. It's meant to be inclusive, it's meant to be transparent, and it's meant to involve a diversity of views. And so there's no litmus test to join the group. We have monthly phone calls, which I'll talk about in just a second. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is move the needle on coordinating climate-based, community-based climate solutions and resiliency efforts across the state. And as Bruce alluded to, there's some really amazing things that are going on. Our website, which I've posted in the chat, is now hosted by the Montana Institute on Ecosystems. And because we're going through some personnel changes right now with the Institute on Ecosystems, I'm still maintaining my previous website, which is here. I'll just kind of go through this because this is the most updated website. But you can see we just kind of give an idea, an overview of what our network activities are. But mainly, we want to just try to enhance communications. And we've created this listserv, and you can see it's open, free. It's just a way to share information, and anyone can subscribe to that. So I'll encourage you to do that. That same information is on the Institute on Ecosystems page. And then we've got some information here about linking participants and community resiliency plans, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And we're offering some resources and publications, and we've had some past events, not much going on in terms of face-to-face with COVID. But we do record our monthly meetings. Our next meeting is going to be, it's the first Thursday of the month, March 4th. And we try to feature a speaker. We start with informal announcements, comments that anyone wants to make, and then try to feature a speaker. And March 4th, we'll be featuring Ann Hedges from MEAC, and you can see some of the other speakers that we've had. We record all these and archive them, so you can just click and you can, you can watch and kind of scroll to whichever part of the meeting that you want. The meetings are generally about an hour, and we have over a year of meetings that we've archived. One of the cool things that we're trying to do, though, is link all the participants across the state. And so you can see we've created this kind of Google map of, we've got about 120 people that are subscribed to the listserv. And we have about, 60 people or so that have actually entered information into this. So you can kind of go around the state if you want to see, what sort of work is going on. This is the Kootenai Climate Group, and get in touch with them. But what's kind of cool about this is it's a searchable map. So, if you want to look for something like, I don't know, recycling, you can see that there's one of our subscribers who is a board member with Climate Smart Glacier County. She gives some information about, her areas of interest and expertise. And so again, just a neat way, I think, to link all of the individuals across the state. As I mentioned, we're showcasing the Montana Community Resiliency Plans, and you can see that those are listed here, the ones that are published and available online. And then you can enlarge this map. It's the square in the corner here. And again, do the same thing and look at the specific information. This is this example from the Blackfeet Indian Reservation, and actually download their plans. So maybe I'll just stop there, but do know that you're most welcome and encouraged to join. And each month we have about 30 people on the calls, and again, they're very open, and it's meant for as a venue for asking questions and networking and connecting with all the great work that's going around the state. So I'll stop there and turn it back to you, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. Looks like we have a little bit of work to do to get some dots on those maps for Park County and Livingston. I'm excited about that. So now we're going to move on to kind of getting even more granular into exactly what's happening here in Park County. And yeah, there was an incredible lineup of speakers. We're so grateful. Thank you all for taking the time. And I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions at the end. And I'll let you know that Sarah and I have been tasked with talking about what's happening at the local level. And as we practice this, we easily were 30 minutes into it and said, okay, we got to scrap. We can't talk about everything. So we might have to move a little bit quicker through what we have here going on. But there's a lot going on at the local level. And I want to first start by introducing my co-presenter here, Sarah Stans. Many of you may know Sarah. She grew up in our community and left and returned after spending 12 years in South Africa, working within socioeconomic development and local community impacts on the renewable energy sector of sub-Saharan Africa. Sarah volunteers countless efforts in our community. She serves on the Parks and Trails Board. She's the new chair of the Yellowstone Bend Citizens Council. She works with the Livingston Bike Club. She serves on the board of the Montana Renewable Energy Association. And those are just among a few of her extracurriculars. And then she also leads the Active Transportation Coalition on behalf of the Park County Environmental Council. Okay, so there are lots of ways to get involved, and that is encouraging. There's so much going on. So we're going to give a snapshot. I'm going to start with advocacy. Sarah and I split this talk up into advocacy and individual action. You want to recognize that not everybody feels comfortable showing up at a meeting and submitting comments or testifying. And so there are other ways that individuals can get involved in climate action. And a big theme really came through, I heard from all the presenters, that I want to mention Sarah and I will hammer home to in its planning. So for everybody that loves planning, you're in a good place, you're in a good meeting. I want to kind of say why I think why planning is such a part of climate action. And that planning at the local level, these are the visionary documents that we create for our community. There are a lot of planning efforts underway right now. Those documents aren't necessarily regulatory tools, but that's how we as a community set out our vision. So when the decisions are being made at our city commission or county commission or board meetings, they look at these planning documents where hopefully lots of citizens have showed up and participated and said, we're really concerned about climate. We want to make sure that we have climate action in these documents. And so that when decisions are being made, our decision makers are thinking about climate. So at the local government, I really want to encourage everybody to pay attention to what's going on, that there are so many ways to engage and that we need climate champions at all levels. So there's the tree board, parks and trails board, planning board, conservation board. And you can support these planning processes by participating in those meetings or showing up, listening, commenting, even better yet, joining a board. So I'm going to talk more on later in the presentation about specific board action that's coming up. Of course, the state and federal legislation impacts us here at the local level. So in order for us to have tools to implement locally, we do need leadership at the state and federal level. And so I just wanted to flag a couple of organizations that do follow legislation in Helena right now, and there's so much going on. Paul said that Ann Hedges from Montana Environmental Information Center will be presenting at their next talk. MEIC does a ton of work in Helena. You can check out their website to learn more about bills in Helena and how to testify. And Northern Plains Resource Council also is a really strong leader and has a lot of resources, and you can check out their website. I'll say I testified on a bill in Helena and it was pretty painless. And that's the beauty of Zoom. I can do that from home. And then finally, support and join local organizations. You don't have to become a member of an organization or support a local organization to be a climate advocate, but these organizations are compiling information and tools to take action. So I just listed a few here that we wanted to highlight are, of course, the sponsor organizations. And then I also wanted to share Upper Yellowstone Watershed Group. I put their website in here. I saw that we have Jeff Reed. Maybe Jeff can speak more in the Q&A, but to flag for everybody that the Upper Yellowstone Watershed Group meets monthly, and one of their priorities right now is working on a drought plan for the Upper Yellowstone. So we heard a lot about water planning from our speakers, and a good way to roll up your sleeves and get involved is to follow what the Upper Yellowstone Watershed Group is doing right now. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go through a couple what our organizations are doing. Park County Environmental Council, there's our website. You can go to our Take Action page to learn more about a lot of different ways to get involved. This picture here features our staff and volunteers and students with the Green Initiative. We worked together with other partners, and many of you may know in Livingston, there's an annual music festival called The Hoot. We host thousands of people in downtown Livingston. Because of our efforts, we set a goal of going plastic free for this event, having a plastic free event, which was a big lift, but we did it. And we had, like I said, thousands of people, compost stations all over, lots of volunteers. We ended up creating just 2 waste baskets full of garbage from a music festival with thousands of people. And so that's just an example of a local action that I think is worth celebrating. The Park County Environmental Council, we're also, like I said, there's a lot of planning efforts underway. So if you go to our website, you can see more about community planning at the city and the county. Right now, the big effort underway is updating the City of Livingston's growth policy. They have been meeting twice a month now at the Livingston Planning Board to edit and finalize our growth policy. And like I said, this is a visionary document that sets the stage for how we want to grow as a community, and growth in beautiful rural places adjacent to public lands is a trend that we've been seeing for years. It will continue. So these planning documents are really important to help us as a community set the vision for how we want to grow. So the planning board has been meeting. The next meeting that they're having is February 17th. So that's next Wednesday at 5:30. And at that meeting, they're going to be discussing land use planning and natural resources. So this would be a great place to show up and ask the board to consider climate goals. You can also submit comments to via email at planning@livingstonmontana.org. The county planning board is also working to implement proactive planning strategies, and their next meeting is on the 18th at 4 p.m. So both of those places are great ways to, and in the land of Zoom, you can show up, listen in. You don't have to make comments at your first meeting, but those are great places to ask our planning boards, how are they thinking about climate, and where are the opportunities to implement strategies there. All right, if you have any questions about that, I'm going to speak more to specific meetings at the end, but I just want to encourage you to reach out to us. You can email us at info@PCECMT.org if you want to learn more. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Sarah to talk about what the Yellowstone Bend Citizens Council is up to.
Thanks, Michelle, and good evening, everybody. I'm going to put my Yellowstone Bend Citizens Council hat on as the co-chair, and I'll touch on active transportation and greening our commutes a little bit later on. But for right now, YBCC, so we're based in Livingston. We were founded 6 years ago by everyday Montanans to work on climate change at the grassroots level. As a Northern Plains Resource Council affiliate, our members, we elect and serve as our leadership, determine strategy, direction, and we do the heavy lifting and really work on to support healthy soil, land, and water and air. We also really stand by that everyone, families, schools, businesses, and farmers, we all thrive when we're good stewards of these resources. And while it might be a difficult task, we really aim to look beyond our fences and create a space to listen to one another, to keep our minds open. And it really is at this place where we think that we'll find the creative solutions needed to restore a relationship with nature and as nature ourselves, with these ideals of inclusion, equality, and justice. And it's really just nice to hear that this communication piece keeps coming up in a lot of people's words tonight about how that is so important. How do we share and how do we stay connected, especially in our new COVID economy and ways of engaging. So some of the programs that our members are involved in, we really support clean, affordable, just energy transition, making solar and renewable energy and energy efficiency affordable for everyone, which creates savings felt by the whole community. So the photo that you see here is one of our community projects, and that is the wastewater treatment plant. It's about a 40 kilowatt system, and it was one of our community-owned solar projects that benefits the whole municipality. And then we're aiming to increase that capacity, hopefully in the spring, on the behind the meter project, but that's something to come in the future. And then other projects in our campaigns would include increasing our energy democracy and membership participation at the Park County Co-op, and really doing a vote by mail and having our voice that is heard on those energy choices. We also work on mitigating impacts of fossil fuel transportation, hazardous waste through our community by joining campaigns and reducing our coal loads that are coming through our town, being a coal town and a railroad town. This is a pretty big lift, and I really take my hats off to that committee and what they've been able to achieve. We also devise strategies protecting our urban forest. We're really faced with the issue of the emerald ash borer that's encroaching. So working with the tree board, and this is I saw Marshall on the call, I think, join with the tree board, and really trying to work together across our organizations and our boards and committees to try to come up with ways to make sure that we're prepared for that. And then we also work with strategies and resources to make healthier food choices for people and planet, to kind of the climate diet and focusing on plant-based diets. So we are going to host a Getting to Know YBCC meeting on February 22nd at 5 o'clock. And you can get in touch with us, or you can put your name into the chat. Ava and Sydney are paying attention, and they'll send you a Zoom link to see more about our programs and some of the work that we've done there. So that's YBCC, and I'll tell you more about local actions in a bit, but you can take over, Michelle. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. So then the last organization that's a co-host tonight is Moms Cleaner Force. I'll just quickly say, it's a community of parents across the country working, on one of the most pressing issues for the future of our the next generation, climate change and our children's health. This is a photo of me in DC with my grandma and my son. My grandma, I think, was 92 in that photo, and she flew out to DC to lobby. This is Idaho representative. She's from Idaho. And so MOMS is a federal organization. It's great to be tied in to federal advocacy at the local level, because our advocacy in DC is so much better when we're there together, telling stories with our grandmas. My grandma said to me, "What do they want to, nobody wants to hear my story." And I said, "Yes, they do, Grandma. Like, you have seen so much, and you have such a good story to tell." And really, I think that that's an important thing to realize in climate advocacy, that speaking from your heart, speaking to your decision makers about why this matters for you, that it's critical and really, really impactful. So with Moms Cleaner Force, we also had the opportunity in 2019. I've been able to go out once a year with local families, and we went out in 2019, I guess, before COVID, with 4 high school students from Park High with the Green Initiative. And that was also just an incredible opportunity to take youth to DC and advocate for climate. Right now, I'm just going to mention, I have a Take Action link here. Of course, any of these organizations, you can go to their Take Action, and there are about 5 different petitions that you can sign there. It's a really good way to just click and see what groups are working on and see what sparks your interest, add your name to a petition. That's it seems small, but it adds up, and it's a simple thing that folks can do. The one thing that we're working on right now that I think is interesting at the local level, there is a bill that should be introduced, if it hasn't already, this week or next in Washington, D.C. to electrify school buses. And so Moms Cleaner Force will be working to build support for the electrification of school buses. And then we have the opportunity at the local level to work with Montana Department of Environmental Quality. They've got funding for school bus electrification. So if we could demonstrate at the local level that this is something that our communities want, that helps pass a bill at the federal level. I'm incredibly excited about working on this, because diesel school buses are really bad for our public health and especially for kids. So if anybody's interested in working on that issue, reach out to me. We need to move quickly. So Sarah, I'm getting a flag from Sydney. We just have a couple of minutes. Should we skip this slide, my dear?
Yes, I think we should skip our successes because there's too many.
There's two, but the point of that is that we're doing things and it works when people show up, but we can make change at the local level. So go ahead, Sarah, if you want to quickly go through this. I think our last slide is kind of the most important.
Yeah, I think a lot can be said here, and I think we really struggled on, as an individual, what can I do, you know, day to day, and also we have such a big audience, you know, 60 to 70 people, which I'm super impressed with everybody's participation. So a lot of these seem obvious, they seem generic. However, we really feel that the crux of what we can do is to create and advocate for ways that make these individual choices easier, more convenient, and that the choices that we've had in front of us easier than the choices that we've had in front of us for the past decades, right? So, you know, when I get out on my bicycle, like I did yesterday, and riding around Livingston, and you're going through all the snow and there's no safe place, and you're really strategizing how you even cross the road, shouldn't be an issue. And one of our talks with active transportation, you know, is in Finland. They don't see a dip in their pedestrian and their bicycle use because they really invest in maintaining those networks and those systems. So little things like that. Susan Riegel, YBCC, and Rita Rosier, they put together a community resource for sustainability tips and climate change action. And we're really working on finalizing this document. It could be a whole presentation in itself that provides links, context information, and we're gonna make this public, hopefully. And so that it's a live working document and just a way that our community can connect to these things along with the organizations that are really working on this work. So I'm not going to go any further, and yeah, and I think that's it. I think my only plug here is that on the planning side, the city has just approved a trails and active transportation planning process and a consultant, which is super important with my work with Active Transportation Coalition, and really touches on equality and access and reducing our budget at the city level, and just doing so much for our climate change efforts. So I'm gonna leave that. And Michelle, why don't we just move on if you want to talk about boomerang bags, or just jump into the other?
I'll just quickly say boomerang bags is a plastic effort to reduce plastic bags consumption in our community. And we need volunteers to use them, to sew them, to spread them. So if you're interested in volunteering with that, you can reach out to the contacts there. And then this is kind of our final slide here, where about what's coming up next. And so I listed here, you can see the local board meetings are all listed there. February 17th, planning board meeting. March 3rd, there's another planning board meeting on transportation and economy. That's where we start talking about those solutions that Sarah has talked about, more bikeable communities, make those individual choices easier. But then, like, really exciting, we've talked about, okay, how do we have, what will be our guiding climate document at the local level? And thanks to an AmeriCorps student, sponsored by the Yellowstone Bend Citizens Council, we now in Livingston have a conservation board. And that conservation board is tasked with doing energy efficiency and in conserving energy and investing that back in our community. The conservation board has a meeting on March 8th. They're led by local Michael DeCellis, and I'm not sure if we have him on the call, but on March 8th, they're gonna host a listening session, and that meeting starts at 5:30. And that is a really good spot for all of us to show up and start the conversation about what does a local climate plan look like? Where should that be housed? Should that be a citizen-driven document? Should it start at a city board or a county board? It's really just a listening session, and I think a really good place for us to have that conversation. But there has been a lot of dialogue about how do we put together a climate plan at the local level, and how do we move that forward? So also, you can see on this slide, I have been tasked, where Sarah and I are going to work together to launch a climate coalition at the local level, where we can do monthly calls to share about all these meetings and what's going on. I wanted to flag April 2021 Earth Day, and also Susan Riegel's effort there with a community public resource. So those will be opportunities to volunteer And then we have a couple of upcoming community conversations. We wanted to have a follow-up after this with those members of those planning boards, the conservation board, to talk to us about the processes that are already underway. And so we've put a save the date for March 10th at 12 p.m. of the nexus between planning and climate change at the local level. And then March 17th, we'll also have a conversation around walkable and livable communities. So I think that just to move here to our final slide with everybody's contact, I think there's a lot of opportunities to get involved. And if you're interested in any of the topics that we've presented on today, please reach out to us or the speakers. And with that, I'm going to open it up to Q&A.